In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is
My father abandoned me when he discovered I was not his daughter. 7 years later, he demands to give me away. My story begins 7 years ago, when my father discovered something that would change our lives forever. One day, he happened upon some text messages on my mother's cell phone that she had forgotten to delete. These messages were from her boss and revealed without a doubt that the two of them were having an affair. Upon seeing this, my father immediately confronted my mother. He caught her completely off guard and she had no way to deny the obvious. What followed was an argument so intense that I can still remember it with total clarity. After a lot of pressure, my mother finally confessed everything. She admitted that she had been having encounters with her boss on and off for years. At that point, she had been working at the same company for almost 2 decades, which made everything even more disturbing to think that this affair with her boss had gone on for so long. But the worst was yet to come. My father asked her specifically if the affair had been going on when she became pregnant with me. My mother became visibly nervous at the question. After much insistence, she finally admitted that yes, she had continued to have relations with her boss during that period. This meant that there was a possibility that my father was not really my biological father. I saw how my father's face lost all its color as he processed this information. He turned to look at me. I was there paralyzed with horror. After hearing my mother's confession, my father looked at me with a broken expression and, with a voice trembling with pain and doubt, he told me that we needed to take a DNA test immediately to confirm if I was really his daughter. At that time I was 18 years old, and until then I had lived believing that we had a perfect family. From one day to the next, my whole world collapsed. Not only had I discovered that my mother had been cheating on my father for years, but now there was the terrifying possibility that the man who had raised me was not even my biological father. We took the DNA test, and when the results came back, I was completely devastated. They confirmed our worst fears: my father was not my biological father. The moment we saw those results, I felt my whole reality shatter. My father, who had always been my biggest support and my hero, stood completely still staring at the paper with the results. He didn't say a word to me as I cried silently. Over the next few days, I desperately tried to talk to him, but he was furious with everyone. He wouldn't even look at me and acted as if I had ceased to exist. If I tried to start a conversation, he would either shout at me or completely withdraw into himself. No matter what those results said, I just needed my father to comfort me. The situation got even worse after that. My father announced that he was divorcing my mother and moving out. He also made it very clear that he didn't want to have any kind of relationship with me. He told me straight out that I couldn't call him dad anymore. Those words hit me like a punch in the stomach. In an instant, it was as if he was trying to erase my existence from his life. I begged him to talk to me, but he just left. He filed for divorce and cut off all contact with me. I tried with all my might to communicate with him, but it was clear that he wanted nothing to do with me. I remember that after months of not answering, he once returned my call only to yell at me to stop calling him and to tell me how disgusted he felt just to hear my voice. Those words continue to haunt me to this day. Meanwhile, my mother constantly apologized to me, but her apologies didn't fix anything. I was furious with her for destroying our family. I blamed her for everything, for making my father hate me, for hiding the truth from me for so long, and above all, for tearing our family apart. No matter how many times she said she was sorry, she couldn't undo the damage or repair what she had caused. I felt trapped living at home with her. When all this happened, I was preparing to go to university. Luckily, my parents had been saving for my education for years, and despite the divorce, my father at least didn't take that money away from me. He had told my mother during the divorce proceedings that this would be his last gift to me, and that she should not expect anything more from him in the future. So when I was accepted at a good university, I took the money, packed my things and left home. Once I had moved out, I decided to cut off all communication with my mother. She tried to contact me several times, apologizing and trying to rebuild our relationship. But I couldn't forgive her. Her actions had caused too much damage, and I was too hurt and angry to let her back into my life. As for my father, the situation remained the same. We haven't spoken since the day he told me he wanted nothing to do with me. Over time, I have learned to accept his decision and to live with it. During these 7 years, I have worked extremely hard to build a life for myself, completely alone. I have dedicated myself to succeeding in everything I can, and now I can proudly say that I have come a long way. I feel that I have finally reached a point in my life where I no longer need either of my parents. I have not forgiven my mother and, as for my father, he no longer affects me. The pain he caused me has faded, replaced by indifference. A month ago, my boyfriend James proposed to me and I accepted. James has been my greatest support throughout the time we've been together. He knows my whole family history and loves me anyway. His family has welcomed me with open arms and his parents treat me like a daughter, something I thought I would never experience again. It's wonderful to feel so loved and accepted. Since our engagement, we've been busy planning our wedding and now the big day is very close. I feel really happy with the direction my life is taking and excited to start this new chapter with James. But last week something totally unexpected happened. I received a direct message on Facebook from my father. When I saw his name appear, I was shocked. I didn't even know he had a Facebook account, so seeing his message was a complete surprise. Since he doesn't have any current contact information, he must have found me through Facebook somehow. In the message, my father wrote to me that he had found out about my upcoming wedding from some cousins and family members. He said he was glad to hear that I was finally getting married and congratulated me. Then he dropped the real bombshell. He said he wanted to reconnect with me and asked for my phone number so we could talk more. It was strange to read those words, considering that we have been completely out of each other's lives for years. I felt very confused about whether to reply to my father's message. After so long without hearing from him, why was he contacting me now? He was the one who had cut me out of his life, who had told me he wanted nothing to do with me and walked away without looking back. And now, suddenly, he wanted to reconnect. What was going on? Everything felt confusing and somewhat suspicious, as if there had to be some ulterior motive behind the sudden change of attitude. I wasn't sure if I wanted to let him back into my life, not even for a conversation. I spoke to James, my fiancé, because I needed to hear another opinion. He agreed that it seemed strange for my father to reach out just now, especially so close to our wedding. He was also cautious and said he understood why I felt uncomfortable. At the same time, James pointed out that this could be my chance to finally express everything I felt and resolve the things that had been left unresolved for so long. I never really got to say everything I wanted to all those years ago when my father left. He reminded me that the decision was completely mine. If I felt I needed to hear from my father or get some kind of closure, I should consider it. After thinking about it for several days, I finally decided to send my number to my father and told him to call me if he wanted to talk more. It wasn't an easy decision, but I thought I at least needed to hear what he had to say. Today, when my father finally called, I had one of the most uncomfortable conversations of my life. As soon as I heard his voice, all kinds of emotions came flooding back, but I tried to keep them under control. One of the strangest parts was not knowing how to address him. All my life I had called him Dad, but he had forbidden me to use that title. He himself had given up being my father when he left my life. So how was I supposed to call him now? I ended up using his first name, which felt extremely uncomfortable. First, he started by asking me how I had been over the years. He also asked some polite and superficial questions about my fiancé and our upcoming wedding. It felt very artificial, as if he were a stranger trying to make casual conversation with me. I went along with it for a while, but I couldn't ignore the main issue any longer. Finally, I went straight to the point and asked him, "What do you want from me? Why are you contacting me now after all these years of silence?" The words came out faster than I expected. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to let him avoid them. After all he had done, I deserved to know why he was trying to reconnect now. It was then that my father finally opened up and gave me his explanations. He told me how, after discovering my mother's infidelity, he had been overwhelmed with anger, not only towards her, but towards the whole situation. He admitted that he was so consumed by his feelings of betrayal that he ended up taking out much of that anger on me. He said that finding out that I wasn't his biological daughter had been a huge betrayal. At that moment, he felt as if everything he thought he knew about our family had been a lie. He confessed that every time he saw me at that time, it only fueled his anger more, because I was a constant reminder of what my mother had done to him. Hearing him say all this was very painful. It hurt to know that his feelings about the situation had been so tied to his resentment towards me, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. I was punished for no good reason, but then he told me that after his anger began to subside, he started to miss me. He said he thought about me often and regretted how he had treated me, but by then he felt it was too late to contact me. He said he was afraid of how I might react, fearing that I would reject him after all the pain he had caused me. However, when he found out about my upcoming wedding, he realized how much he wanted to be part of my life again, and that he regretted everything he had done to push me away. Then, for the first time, my father apologized to me for all the years lost, telling me how much he regretted his actions. He said he wanted us to have a fresh start. Listening to him, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. On the one hand, it was comforting to hear him admit how his actions had hurt me. But on the other hand, it was difficult not to feel frustrated. If he had started to miss me years ago, why had he waited until now, until he found out about my wedding, to finally contact me? What was the real reason? I had kept quiet while he spoke, letting him say everything he needed to, but when he mentioned the idea of a new beginning, I couldn't hold back any longer. I told him straight out that I didn't want any of it. I told him he was moving too fast, and that I didn't trust him enough to have a new beginning. Although I appreciated that he had apologized, that didn't mean that I had forgiven him, not yet. Maybe I never would. I told him that while I understood that he was angry with my mother for what she had done, and I could even understand how betrayed he must have felt, that didn't justify what he did to me. I reminded him that I was not to blame for any of this. I was just a young girl caught in the middle of something I couldn't control. Yet he abandoned me with my mother as if I meant nothing to him. From one day to the next, I lost him, not only as a father, but as someone I could trust. He left me alone to deal with the consequences of it all, and I had to live all these years without him in my life. Instead of acknowledging my pain, my father became defensive. He insisted that my anger was misplaced. He said that I should only be angry with my mother, not with him, because he had also been a victim of her actions. He kept repeating that everything he did, the way he pushed me away and abandoned me, was a consequence of the pain my mother had caused him. Then he started pressuring me to leave the past behind and try to forget the years we had been apart. He told me that all he wanted now was for us to move on as if none of this had happened. Then he revealed what he really wanted, the opportunity to give me away at my wedding. Hearing that left me completely shocked. I couldn't believe what he was saying. Just yesterday he didn't even know if he still considered me his daughter, and now, suddenly, he wanted to participate in one of the most important moments of my life as if those lost years didn't matter. I pointed this out to him, telling him how absurd it was to make such a request when this was literally our first conversation after years. I reminded him that he hadn't shown any interest in being my father or cared about me at all in all this time, but now he wanted to give me away in front of everyone and act like my father. His request felt so sudden and out of place, and I couldn't understand how he thought it would make sense after everything he had done or failed to do for so many years. So I flatly rejected my father. I told him there was no way I wanted him to give me away. In fact, I had already asked my maternal grandfather to do so. My grandfather had been very honored by the request and we shared a very close bond. However, my father seemed to take offense at this. He began to accuse me of breaking his heart by not allowing him to do this for me. He told me that I was being selfish by not letting him give me away and that I was behaving exactly like my mother. He insisted that I had no right to ask my grandfather to give me away and that I should have tried to contact him first. My father then started demanding that I cancel the agreement with my grandfather and that I should give him a chance to fix things, as if everything could be forgotten in an instant just because he had decided to contact me. I was surprised by his audacity. Fortunately, I am no longer that scared little girl. I refused and stood my ground. I told him I wasn't going to change my mind. My grandfather was someone who had always been there for me, who had supported me when I felt abandoned by my father, and I wasn't going to turn my back on him because of someone who had stayed away from me for so many years. My father kept trying to make me feel guilty, insisting that I needed to put his feelings above everything else, but I still didn't give in. Since then, my father has been texting me nonstop and I can't help but wonder, Reddit, am I the bad guy? Update 1. I want to clarify a few things that people keep asking in the comments. Even though my father cut off all contact with me, not all of his family sided with him. Some of my cousins on his side have stayed in touch with me over the years, and that's how I think my father has been able to keep up with my life through them. I find it strange that my father has been keeping an eye on me through them but has never contacted me directly until now. As for my father's parents, they died years before my parents' divorce, so they weren't around to see everything that happened with the infidelity and what came after. Sometimes I wonder how they would have reacted, considering how close I was to them growing up, but since they are no longer with us, I will never be able to know if they would have supported me or my father. As for my mother's family, they all turned against her when my father revealed his infidelity during the divorce. To this day, they still haven't forgiven her for what she did, but fortunately they have never rejected me. My maternal grandparents in particular have always been present in my life. They have continued to support me and give me their love, especially when everything happened with my father. Even when I went to university and stopped talking to my mother, they understood perfectly why I didn't want to keep in touch with her. And they respect my decision to continue to stay away. When I asked my maternal grandfather to give me away, he was incredibly happy and that meant a lot to me. He has been a very important person in my life and I can't imagine anyone else in his place. He was so happy and proud that I asked him, and I can't take that away from him no matter how much my father insists. To be completely honest, I have no desire for my father to walk me down the aisle. After everything that has happened, I still don't know what kind of relationship, if any, I want to have with him in the future. There is too much unresolved pain, anger, and confusion. I don't think I can ever have a relationship with him again just because he suddenly wants to be part of my life again. I'm still processing everything and I don't feel ready to give him such a special place at my wedding, especially when I don't even know what our relationship is. Unlike my father, my mother has respected my wishes and has not tried to contact me, which is exactly what I want. I don't think I could handle it if she started looking for me now too. Update 2. After much thought and reflecting on all the advice I received from Reddit, I have realized that I am truly better off without my father in my life. I no longer have a place for him, so I do not appreciate his sudden interest in reconnecting. I feel like he is trying to re-enter my life on his own terms and I am no longer willing to allow that. As he was clearly not ready to hear me in a direct conversation, I realized that the only way to truly express my feelings was in writing. I needed to take the time to gather my thoughts and put it all into words. Just because he seemed to have moved on and wanted to pretend that nothing had happened, didn't mean that I had to. I wasn't ready to just forgive him and pretend that all the years of pain had disappeared. James, my fiancé, has been incredibly understanding throughout this process. He encouraged me to finally express what I was thinking to get it off my chest and then cut off any further contact with my father, which is exactly what I did. I didn't want to keep carrying around all these unresolved emotions, and I knew that telling my father exactly how I felt would be the only way to get some peace of mind, regardless of whether he understood or accepted it. So this is what I sent my father on Facebook. I want to start by saying that I completely understand that you were angry with Mom for what she did to you, but I was just a child caught between the two of you. However, you decided to walk away from me, you abandoned me, and I had to grow up without you in my life. You have no idea how many nights I have cried for you, wishing you would come back, wondering if you even thought about me. I didn't deserve any of it. You said you missed me after your anger had subsided, but the truth is that you left me alone with my pain for all these years. You didn't even try to contact me. Your actions speak louder than any words. You left a void in my life that I had to learn to fill by myself. And now, when everything is finally starting to feel stable in my life, you get in touch because I'm getting married. Why didn't you look for me before, when I needed you most, when I was trying to pick up the pieces of my life? You were nowhere to be found. You said you want to make things right and start over, but that's not something I can do that easily. I've spent so much of my life without you, and I'm not sure I want a relationship with you at all. Just because you've decided to show up now doesn't mean I'm ready to forgive everything and move on. As for giving me away at the altar, I'm not comfortable with that. I've already asked my grandfather and he's happy to be there for me. Asking him to step aside now to accommodate you doesn't feel right, and I can't do that to him. He's the one who's been there for me every step of the way, and he deserves to be the one to give me away. Please understand that I am no longer angry with you. I am just hurt, and I need time to decide if there is even a place for you in my life in the future. I am not ready to have you back in my life yet, and I don't know if I ever will be. So this is goodbye for now. I am cutting off contact with you for good, so please don't try to get in touch again. I hope you find your peace as I have. After sending this, I blocked my father so he couldn't contact me anymore. It's been very difficult, but it's my way of taking control and moving on with my life on my own terms. Update 3. Today was my wedding rehearsal and everything was going perfectly until I was surprised by a totally unexpected arrival. My father showed up, accompanied by one of my cousins whom I had invited. I was so surprised that I could hardly process it. I hadn't seen my father in so long that it took me a moment to even recognize him. He looks much older than I remembered. After all the years of not seeing each other, the last thing I expected was for my father to show up in person. My cousin explained that apparently my father had been begging her for days to let him come with her, and in the end she gave in and brought him. James, as expected, flew into a rage when he saw them and was ready to throw them both out, but my father begged me to talk to him. Despite everything, I decided to take my father aside for a private conversation. I needed to know what he was thinking and why he had come, especially after everything I had written to him. As soon as we were alone, my father told me that my message had only made him feel more guilty and that he was willing to do anything to earn my forgiveness, that he would do everything possible to show that he was a different person now. He insisted that he really wanted to be part of my life from now on and that he wanted my husband's future children to know him. I got angry and told him that he had no right to show up now, after all that had happened, and expect me to just let him back into my life. He couldn't just turn up and act as if everything could be fixed in a moment. I told him that his turning up without my permission and begging for forgiveness now was manipulative, not sincere, and that he had no right to ask anything of me, especially not the privilege of being part of one of the most important moments of my life. I reminded him of the years he spent ignoring me, making me feel like I meant nothing to him, and how I had been forced to live without a father because of his selfish decisions. I told him that his apology now did not erase the years of pain, the abandonment, or the way he destroyed our family. Then, with that familiar entitled attitude, my father asked me if I would at least reconsider inviting him to my wedding. He said that even if he couldn't walk me down the aisle, he would still be happy to attend as a guest. He kept repeating how much he had suffered without me and how he wanted to be there for me as the father he had never been. I told him it was too late, that no matter how hard he tried to manipulate the situation, it wasn't going to work. I told him that he had lost me years ago and that there was no going back. I asked him to leave quietly and not to cause a scene, as it was embarrassing enough that he had gate-crashed my event. After letting off steam with my father, I went to confront my cousin. She knew full well how much pain my father had caused me, and yet she had betrayed me by allowing him to come. The fact that she went behind my back and brought him back into my life without even telling me was unforgivable. I felt completely betrayed by her, and I told her straight that she was no longer invited to my wedding. I've had enough of people disrespecting me and pressuring me to forgive someone when I'm not ready. This is my wedding, my moment, and I'm not going to let anyone ruin it. Update 4. Hi everyone, it's been a while since my last update, but I've been very busy. James and I got married, and the day was everything I had dreamed of. Our wedding went perfectly, and I was surrounded by the people who truly love and support me. It was a day full of joy and celebration, and the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. Since I saw my father on the day of the wedding rehearsal, I haven't seen him or heard from him again, and honestly, that's exactly how I want it. He hasn't contacted me since, and I feel as if a weight has been lifted. I'm glad I told him everything I needed to. There are no more unanswered questions, no guilt, no wondering if he'll try to come back into my life. Now I just concentrate on living the rest of my life happily with James. Wish me luck, guys.